Welcome to LeadHerShip, Stories of Life, Leadership, and Business. Well, my friends, I am excited to be back with you today. Today, we're going to be talking about something that I have not wanted to talk about, if I'm being just totally honest. It's something that I feel called to talk about, and I've been very resistant to it because it's probably the most shameful experience that I've had in my life. And it's incredibly uncomfortable and very revealing and all that stuff and vulnerability and all those things. And like our friend Brene Brown says, I'm going to step into the vulnerability and I'm going to be my authentic self today. And I'm going to be brave and have courage. And so today I want to talk to you all about addiction and how it's affected my life and some tools and things that I've discovered along my journey of recovery from addiction. And so welcome in. Let's get comfy. And welcome to my home. I'm excited to be here in my home with all of you today. So addiction is something that I have been challenged with for the majority of my life. I can see back, there's all sorts of different forms of addiction. So we'll talk about them and I won't cover them all because there's so many. But things like overeating is an addiction. Doing drugs and drinking excessive alcohol and being on social media too much and excessive exercise. And some people can be addicted to sex and some people can be addicted to television. Some people can be addicted to being inside, like being separate, being isolated can be an addiction. Some people can be addicted to work. There's addictions to gambling. There's addictions to pornography. There's addictions to a lot of things. And so I'm going to specifically talk about the things that I've gone through and been challenged with and been able to overcome or am still overcoming. And I hope that it brings clarity to you and inspires you and allows you to feel empowered and that it infuses strength inside of you so that you can too overcome addiction. Because what I do know, having overcome several times addiction and being in the place now where I consider myself mostly completely sober, there's so much freedom. There's so much love. There's so much openness. There's so much clarity that comes from stepping into recovery and stepping into our authentic selves and allowing ourselves to be free from the bondage of addiction. It really is a bondage. So I'll share with you some stories that have just come into my heart. And so I can remember back, even as a little kid, being addicted to food. There was a time in my life as a kid that I did not have food. And food was very scarce in my life when I was about 8 years old. Specifically, I can think about between about 7 and 9 years old, around the same time I was experiencing sexual abuse. And so food definitely, when I had it, became my friend and my comfort. So it invited some dysregulated eating. And food is difficult and it's something that I'm still challenged with to this very day. Food is difficult because we have to have it. And so we can't just be not around it. And so it's been a challenge for me for sure. It's something that I'm really excited to move through and past this year, especially. I find myself having some freedom with food and just some big awarenesses and aha moments about how I've used food, how it limits me, how it keeps me isolated and with like a false feeling of safety. And so there's that. When I moved into my teenage years, when I was about 14, I started to do drugs. I started to ditch school at high school and I just really had, I, I'm sure my nervous system was so dysregulated that I couldn't even focus. I mean, I was completely not present in school. And I would just get up and walk around. And eventually I found a group of people who were ditching, and they were like the stoner crowd in school, and started hanging out with them and doing drugs. And it wasn't long before I was doing really heavy drugs. And it wasn't a teenager at school that introduced me to really heavy drugs, actually. We lived out in the boonies of Tucson, Arizona. And there was we lived in a trailer, and across the street from this trailer was like a little shopping center. And in the shopping center was a bar and a restaurant, and there was a floral shop. And my mom was often found at this bar. If I needed to find my mom in the evenings, I knew that I needed to go there to find her. And on Mother's Day, when I was about 14, 15 years old, I went across the street to see my mom, and it was Mother's Day. And I wanted to get her a really pretty flower arrangement. So I went to the little floral shop, and the woman there said, I told her whose daughter I was, and she, of course, knew who my mother was. And she goes, oh, well, let's make her a beautiful flower arrangement together. And she didn't charge me any money. And we started making this flower arrangement. And she took me in the back, and there was crystal meth lines on the back counter. And this woman was like in her 50s. She was a grown up. And her workers were there, and she in the back were doing meth, and invited me to do some. And I did some. And it was one of the best feelings I had ever felt. It made me feel confident and beautiful and successful. And it completely took away all my feelings of trauma, and I didn't have any worries, I felt like. And so I really liked it. And I spent that evening with her doing lines and putting together a floral basket for my mom, which I delivered to her at the bar. And it was such a beautiful arrangement. I had so much creativity, and just kept down this path for like a year or more. I started hanging out with other kids who did drugs like this. In the area that I lived in Tucson, it was widely available. As a girl, I really didn't have to pay for it. Um, at least monetarily, I didn't have to pay for it. I had to pay for it in other ways, obviously. And so I was really shrouded in shame during this time of my life, where I was extremely promiscuous. So I became even addicted to like sex, and thinking that the only way that I was worthy is if I was having sex or performing a sex act or something like that, and doing drugs. And we were doing crystal, we were doing cocaine, we were drinking alcohol, we were smoking marijuana, we were doing all sorts of things, LSD. And it's a wonder I am still living, truly going through that moment. I mean, I was hanging out with criminals, I was gang affiliated during this time. Just a hot mess. And really, I just had no worth. I had no self-love, no ability really to understand love or think that I was worthy of anything more than what I was experiencing right then. And during this time, I was running away from home. There was a time where I left from home. I think I was gone, I think I was gone like 2 weeks. And when you're doing crystal meth, you don't eat. You don't eat or drink. And so I got very sick. I lost a lot of weight, and I came home one day and walked in my house, and my mom like had a hard time even recognizing me when I went through the front door. And so my mom kind of became a victim to my story, because she was struggling with a teenager who was out of control. I was out of control. And it really just was because I was trying to cope with the feelings I was feeling from having been abused terribly, and I had no help. And before I started doing drugs, before I went and moved back with my mom, around the age of 9, 10 years old, I had been sent to live with my brother and his wife. And during that time, they um, took me to church. And I was led to the Lord by this beautiful woman named Callie Underwood, who still goes to the same church here in Alaska. I believe her family even opened the church. And one night we had like a shut in for the youth group. And there that night, she led me to the Lord, taught me about who Jesus was and God was. And it really resonated with me. And I think that was so beautiful. And I do see how just that moment really protected me because of the way that I behaved as a teenager was super risky. I mean, it's amazing. I don't have AIDS, that I'm not sick, that I'm not dead, that I wasn't trafficked, that I wasn't murdered, that I didn't go to jail. I mean, God's covering was on my life. And even I had gone back and forth to my mom and then back to my brother and sister-in-law a couple of different times. And both times, my brother and sister-in-law, I think it was mostly my sister-in-law, was very diligently going to church. And my brother was also working on this in his life and growing more in his faith. Um, and so I'm very grateful to God and to them for allowing me to have that covering. So I am moving through that, and I am now 15 years old, and I am out partying one night, and um, there's this guy I need a ride, and he's there, and he's much older than me. But I end up getting in a relationship with him, and after just a short amount of time, found out I was pregnant with my daughter, Angelica. And miraculously, I was able to get off of all the drugs, I was smoking cigarettes, I was drinking alcohol, I was doing drugs. And I just stopped it all because for some reason, I intuitively knew that I didn't want my baby girl to be affected in any way. And I knew that she was growing inside my belly. And I didn't want any of her, like what I mentally thought about was I didn't want, like, I could see her little veins and arteries and nerves being formed and created. And I didn't want anything that I did to affect that. So really, because God is good, he gave me that knowing. And so I was able to just stop cold turkey. And so I did. I didn't do any drugs or anything like that. All through my pregnancy, I ate really healthy. I maintained a really healthy weight. Um, and I stayed clean that whole entire time. After my daughter was born, I was a really phenomenal mom for being 16 years old. I was very attentive to her. I was working a job. I was going to school. I was doing all the things that I needed to do to be productive and to be a good mom. And I think Angelica was about 9 or 10 months old. And there was a boy at work I had met. And he started inviting me out to his car at like work breaks and stuff. And he started offering me drugs. And pretty quickly, I started doing drugs again and things like crystal meth again. And so I became addicted. And I did the thing I never, ever thought I'd ever do. And I left my daughter with my mother and moved in with him and got really bad into drugs. And I was a functional drug addict. I don't know how I did that, but I worked a full-time job and did drugs. And I mean, we would travel in Tucson, Arizona, back and forth and back and forth. And one day, probably 6 or 7 times to get our fix over and over again. I can't even imagine how much money we were spending. I had no idea. And so just really fell into a pit. I ended up having another relationship. My boyfriend and I broke up, and having another relationship, I ended up getting Angelica back. I was severely depressed, and I got into another relationship, had kind of some like a one night stand. It lasted more than one night, but it wasn't anything serious. It really just was about drugs and sex. And got pregnant with Jaden. And I didn't stop drugs right away when I found out I was pregnant with Jaden. I remember telling my family that I was pregnant, and just the shame on their faces, their disapproval and disappointment in me really just again shrouded me in shame. And I decided there's no way I can keep this baby. I'm completely unfit. Um, I was having relationships with multiple people. I had Angelica. I had a roommate, thank God, that helped me take care of Angelica, and she was a good person and didn't do drugs and stuff like that. It's so interesting to me as I look back on my life, like when I couldn't, God placed people in my life to help me. Every single portion of my life, I can see that action where when I couldn't, God put people in my life so that I could. It's why I think there must be some holy purpose on my life, because that doesn't happen for everybody. And I feel so grateful and so humbled that that was the case for me. And I'm so grateful. And that's what I do here, because I want to use my life. Like I've always said, even since I was a recovering teenager, even after I had Angelica, that I really hope that I didn't go through all that I went through just for myself. I feel like that must be a waste. And I hope that I went through what I went through for everybody else, to help other people through their stuff. And so as I move through my stuff and teach and learn and grow and shift and heal, that I hope that the tools and the things that I have also help you to do the same. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful to be doing this work. I really am. And so I had my Jaden, or I didn't have my Jaden yet. I was pregnant with him. And as I started to show, I started to recognize that people really didn't want to hang out with a pregnant woman. That's not very sexy to be, you know, hanging out with a pregnant girl. So I sort of got left on my own. I had Angelica still. I was very pregnant with Jaden. And at about 5 months or so pregnant, there was a time, even I'll go a little bit back before this time, there was a time where I had let Jaden's biological dad know that I was pregnant, and he really wanted me to have an abortion. And because I saw that my family was completely against me, um, I decided that I was going to have an abortion. And in those days, insurance, Medicaid, and stuff didn't pay for abortion. I had to pay $700 to have one. And I was so far pregnant, I was like 3 or 4 months pregnant at this time, that it's a whole process. And I couldn't afford it. Again, God's work in my life. If I had $700, I was so desperate, I probably would have had an abortion. But I couldn't. I couldn't get $700, and he wouldn't give me $700. And so I had this little human growing inside of me. I remember not wanting to connect with my belly and my baby. I'd feel him move and I would just try to ignore it. I really stopped eating. I I remember one time my mom took me out to lunch, and I ordered like a burger and fries, and I took one bite of my burger and told her that I was full, and I was legitimately full. I would eat like one cracker. Again, dysregulated eating. You know, we can overeat or we can not eat at all. It's all dysregulated eating. I lost a bunch of weight. I was like 145 pounds when I gave birth to my son, Jaden. And that's pretty underweight. I was 5'8". I'm 5'8". And that was 9 months pregnant. I was 145 pounds. So I'm moving through my pregnancy with my precious son, and I am starting to have results from not having a job and everybody's left me and no one wants to hang out with me, and I can't have an abortion, so I'm still pregnant. And um, I go to see if I can move in with my mom. I'm not doing drugs anymore. I am severely depressed. I am going through withdrawals with my precious little daughter with me, and that is not awesome. Some of my most shameful moments in life, and I've shared these stories on my podcast before, so you can go back to episode 1, I think, and listen to my story to get the details. But just awful, awful, awful experiences. Uh, yeah. And my family was just things like, I remember a couple of specific experiences where my grandma, my mom's mom, I was over at her house and she knew I was pregnant, and she just really kind of like so meanly said to me, I can't even tell my friends that I'm having a great grandchild because you can't keep your legs shut. And just this extreme judgment. And I just felt so small and so wrong and so bad. There was another moment where I had moved into the decision to give Jaden up for adoption and had started working with a Christian adoption agency. And I tell this story in full on episode 1. Um, and I was able to pick out his parents and started communicating with his parents, or with the parents I had picked out for Jaden, and meeting with them regularly, and really started to have some recovery. I started to recover myself and become a good mom again, and all this different kind of stuff. And my sister-in-law called me one day, and we were just talking, and she knew about the adoption and she thought that was a great idea. Has always been a huge advocate for adoption, very much against abortion. And she said, if you keep this baby, if you don't give him up for adoption, I'm going to call you and tell you what I really think about you. And I just remember listening to that and just really, again, deciding and learning that I was really bad and wrong and not worthy of really anything and not accepted or loved by anyone. And, oh man, as I think about that, it just kind of chokes me up. I feel like this ball in my throat as I think about that. And so I was feeling very alone. And I was moving through being evicted. My ex-boyfriend had come and taken my car, so we were back on the bus. And I had Angelica, and I go to my mother and I ask her if I can come move in with her. And she was in a new relationship, and she looked at me and said, no, I don't want to ruin my relationship, so no. And right there, right after she gave me that answer, I looked over and saw the yellow pages, and I grabbed the yellow pages and I just looked up adoption agencies and just decided I was going to give my baby up for adoption. That there's no way, I can barely take care of Angelica, barely take care of myself. I just got to do what I got to do here. And so moved through that process. It was a beautiful process. Working with this agency, I had a caseworker that met with me regularly. I really was being poured into and loved. The adoptive parents were really pouring into me and loving me, meeting very regularly. And then right before I was to give him up for adoption in the state of Arizona, you have, at least at that time, you had to sign your rights away before you gave birth. So it's getting to be that time. And the adoptive parents called a special meeting, and we met, and they said, Jennifer, we just see that you're a great mom, and we see that you're off of drugs and you're doing your best. And yeah, we see you don't have money and you're suffering. You're probably going to get evicted, but that's not a reason to give your baby up. And we've been praying and praying. And yes, we want a baby so bad. And we care about you so much. And we feel like God does not want us to adopt your baby. We really feel like God is telling us that you're supposed to be his mama. And I was so shocked. And I even was like, oh no, oh no, no, no. You're going to get my baby. I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not going to do that to my family. Um, and because I think they knew I was really adamant and had been so determined with it and had decided this was what I was going to do and felt so helpless and hopeless, that they pulled out of the adoption themselves. These precious, precious people. I wish I could remember their names, but I cannot remember their names. I know they lived in Sierra Vista, Arizona. This is back in like 1999, 2000. And she was a banker and he was a firefighter. And they were like in their early to mid 30s. So if you're out there and you're listening to this, I would love, love, love to connect with you and tell you thank you again. I don't even think I got to tell them thank you. So I got permission to be a mom to my precious boy. And keep him. And I did. I gave birth to Jaden and Angelica and I had been evicted because the adoption agency was helping me pay my rent. And because I chose not to give him up for adoption, they stopped that. So I was evicted and I had nowhere to go after I had my baby. And my mom had worked in, she worked for the state of Arizona in like the welfare division, like food stamps, welfare and stuff. And so she had some connections. And she gave me the information for a homeless shelter for unwed mothers, for like young teenage mothers. And it was like this house where we all stayed, shared a room. There was all these other teen moms who had babies. So I took my precious babies home, to that homeless shelter for unwed moms, and moved through. Ended up having so many blessings. Like there again is God showing up in my life when I was making a choice. God made it so that I was walking in my purpose regardless of whether I knew it or not, or had strength to do it or not. He saw fit that I did. No matter what my family thought, God thought that I was worthy. And so I'm moving through and I'm smoking cigarettes, so I'm addicted to cigarettes, and I'm not doing drugs. I'm not drinking. I'm not having sex or anything like that. I'm really focused on just me and my babies. And we ended up getting an apartment, and I ended up starting to go to church and stop smoking cigarettes and really dedicated my life and my heart and my mind and my family and everything I was doing to God. That's one thing I know to be absolutely true. If you're working through addiction, we cannot do it alone. We have to have our higher power involved. You can call it whatever you want to call it. I call it God. I call it Jesus. I call it Holy Spirit. I call it angels. I call it saints. Everybody's spiritual coming up under me and supporting me right where I'm at and bringing me to the next space. I know that I know I have not done this all on my own. I know that I know God has been in every single moment of my life from the time I was conceived up until now, and will be until I leave this earth. And then will be with me even as I'm back in spirit form. So that's what I know for sure. Okay. And a lot of things tell us that, if you look at anything with the 12 steps, it talks about connecting with your higher power, that we don't have the ability all on our own to move through things like that are this deep. And I'll share with you before we get off of this podcast, some books that have really helped me over the last 4 or 5 years through my recovery journey. So I'm moving through, I dedicate my heart and my life to church, okay, and to God. I'm not doing anything else but that. I'm working, I'm going to school, I'm working 2 or 3 jobs, I'm being a mama, I'm taking care of my babies. Some things that I am extremely struggling with is like anger, frustration, overwhelm. I am having like yeah, shouting at my children and scaring them, even throwing things, breaking things just out of sheer, like, total overwhelm. And um, I, for like 5 years, this is where I stay. And I move through recovery pretty beautifully. And really, that was like my 12-step program, is going to church and learning about God and learning about prayer and learning about worship and praise and learning about being together and not isolating and um, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't perfect. It was bumpy for sure. Um, and so I, my next real experience with what I can recall as addiction is after I was in Alaska. So Jaden was 7 when we moved to Alaska. So for about 7 years, I maintained sobriety and did a beautiful job. Moved to Alaska. I drank a little. I hung out with my husband. I mean, we had fun. Um, but I didn't have any kind of like addiction. Alcohol has never been something that I've ever been challenged with. I can take it or leave alcohol. I can have alcohol in my home and I don't drink it. Very rarely do I have a drink. And I don't think anything wrong with alcohol. I think it's the excessive use of alcohol. I think that alcohol can be very poisonous to our system. It's why we feel, it's why we can feel hung over the next day, because it's poisoned our body. But I don't judge it as bad and wrong. But I do think that it's so widely accepted that so many people struggle with alcohol addiction and they don't even realize it. I think so many people drink a glass or two of wine a night, sometimes a whole bottle a night, and they don't consider themselves alcoholics or having struggled with addiction. And it's so widely accepted. Even like in the real estate industry, I see it a lot. It hurts my heart a lot because I also see that there are so many realtors. Real estate is a stressful gig. And there's so many realtors who really are challenged with alcoholism, and it affects their life and families. And yet we're showing up at meetings and having alcohol and giving alcohol away for free. And I mean, I've heard stories that if you want realtors to show up, you have to have alcohol present, period. And so that really hurts my heart because it is so widely accepted and um, it is so damaging, or can be so damaging. And it is just a coping to move through the stress and stuff. So there's that. I was hanging out with my husband, and we were having a lot of fun and hanging out with our friends and stuff. We get married, and we're not really drinking. I didn't have a struggle with it. My husband really didn't either. He's really never been challenged with addiction ever in his life. He's never done drugs, like hard drugs. He used to smoke marijuana, but um, he's really never been challenged. He's never smoked cigarettes a day in his life, and he can really move through things pretty easily. He's pretty strong mentally and emotionally. And so I'm with my precious husband. We're married now. We've got Angelica and Jaden. And I am struggling. I start losing babies right away. And so I start struggling with dysregulated eating and I start overeating. And pretty quickly in our marriage, I gain a significant amount of weight because I have no idea that I'm doing this. I have no awareness about it. And I'm just coping with the pain of losing babies. And also, I think it was a shock to my system to be married and sharing life with somebody. And like I've talked about before, I didn't know I was traumatized. Like I knew what I had gone through, but I didn't realize what it had done to me mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, in my nervous system. I had no idea. My husband also had been traumatized And he didn't know he had been traumatized or was a traumatized person. So now there's two traumatized people coming together, changing their lives, moving forward in this family. And it was not graceful and easy. There was lots and lots of struggle. And I've talked about a lot of that stuff. And so I have really dysregulated eating. I'm also finding myself isolating. And so that's another thing that I tend to do when I am in dysregulation, that I isolate. And so that does not help people. It doesn't help when you're overeating. You just gain more and more weight. And so I'm moving through this. I'm feeling shameful. I'm not feeling good about myself. And I move through the time where by now I've lost my 8 babies. I've had a full hysterectomy. I'm 30 years old and I am in extreme pain. My back has gone out. I'm getting ready to have back surgery and I'm on Percocet. And I'm on a significant amount of Percocet. And I become addicted to my painkillers. And I am addicted to painkillers for several years. People would not know that I had an addiction issue going on. I kept it very secret. Maybe they knew. I didn't think they knew. But I was really suffering and struggling. And was able to work with a friend whose mother had also had a similar issue that I did and had been on a significant amount of painkillers. And painkillers really are just heroin. I mean, that's the reality. It's opioids. It's heroin, okay? And you can take enough painkillers to kill yourself. There's lots in the United States. There are a lot of stay-at-home moms and working moms who are significantly addicted to painkillers. It is shocking, the statistics that are out there about painkillers. I do not believe in painkillers. But having gone through that, I have this friend. His mom's going through the same stuff, and he brings me, and it's my best friend's husband, the same best friend who got me into Inspire Leadership Academy. He says to me, "Hey, I've done this for my mom. I grow a certain strain of marijuana for her specifically, and I would love you to try it." And I'm like, I'm not smoking marijuana. Like, all I can think of is I'm not that person anymore. There's no way I'm going to do that. But I just trust and I know that I cannot be on these painkillers anymore. It's altering my moods. It's making me really moody. I had very big swings of up and down moods. I was very irritated. My husband and I were not getting along at all. And I was just really at my wit's end. So was my husband. And so I decided to try smoking marijuana and did, and was able to successfully get myself off of opioids on my own. Let me just tell you, it is like getting off of heroin. I probably should have gotten some medical care to move through that, but I didn't. There's lots of things that can happen when you're trying to get off of drugs at that high level. But I did it on my own one night. My skin was completely crawling. I was sweating what felt like to death. I was crying, extremely uncomfortable, and I was just up for a whole 24-hour period withdrawing from opioids. And I did it on my own with the help of cannabis. And so to help manage my pain, because I was still in a significant amount of pain, I've talked about that in previous podcasts as well. And so I was smoking marijuana on a regular basis to help manage my pain. And I will say, I am a supporter of the cannabis industry because it is natural. It grows on the earth. I do believe it's in a medicinal product that can help move through addiction shifting. It can help us move through if we're struggling with sickness that creates pain or nausea. Or if somebody is really struggling with pain and can't sleep, it can help with those things. So I did use it medicinally for a long time. However, after my pain was gone, which was 2 or 3 years later, I was still smoking weed. And that is something that I was challenged with for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. And so it's just been recently that I have been able to become sober, to have a sober heart and mind, to really trust that I can be in the world without a substance and I'm going to be okay. I am so grateful and thankful I don't struggle with extreme pain anymore. I really have the tools and the resources in my heart and my mind to where I can move myself through difficult circumstances and I don't need to cope with substances anymore. I do still struggle. I just talked about last podcast my struggle with overeating and dysregulated eating and the significant amount of weight I've gained just over the last 8 to 12 months. And so I've been having some freedom there and awareness there, and I'm excited to move through that. And I'm not perfect. And what I can tell you is that right now, today, I'm sober. Yesterday, I was sober. I can't tell you what happens tomorrow. And that's the thing. I'm a spiritual being living a human experience. Isn't my dream and desire to be sober for the rest of my life, to have this freedom and clarity, to trust myself and be open and not isolate and to be connected? Absolutely. And who knows what tomorrow brings? So what I know is I'm going to do my best. What I know is I have awareness of the things that I need to do in order to keep myself sober. And that's have a connection with God and pray and meditate and start my day with daily intentions. I know that things that really help lift me up when I'm feeling down or just to start my day off well is to listen to music I love. I love music. Music has always moved me ever since I was a little person. I love to sing. I love to be creative. I love to play the piano. I love to um, do those things. And so to do the things that fill us is important in order to stay sober, to have movement in our body, to be connected with positive people, to have people I can call upon that will support me when I am really struggling, to be in an environment that grows me and that allows me to bloom right where I'm at, to make sure that I'm being positive to myself and that everybody around me is treating me well and being positive to me as well, that I'm being positive to other people. And so those are my biggest recommendations: to do things that fill you, to connect with people that grow you, that support you, to be in relationship with God at a deep level, to know that God is there, to know that you can call upon him. There's a couple of books that I'll share with you that have really been helpful to me. One is You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. It's a book that talks about different emotional states that we can be in, how those negative emotional states cause dis-ease inside of our body, and then affirming thoughts and words that can help you move out of that dis-ease and out of that dysregulated feeling and emotion into more positive, grace-based action and ideas. There's also a book that I recently went through, and I'm probably going to teach a class on this coming up in the next year, but I really want to dig into it more and really make it a part of myself and see my own physical results from it. But it's called A Course in Weight Loss, the 21 Spiritual Lessons for Releasing Your Weight Forever. In there, it really talks about, it's by Marianne Williamson, and it really talks about how being overweight really is the result of a lack of loving on our life, from operating in a space of fear and not operating in a space of love. And so there's so many beautiful principles that can be applied in so many different areas, but it's a great book about being addicted to overeating and having weight gain issues. There's also a beautiful book by Russell Brand called Recovery. the freedom from our addictions. Russell Brand, if you know him, he's a famous dude, super awesome guy. I friggin' love Russell Brand. He basically has written a 12-step program in this book called Recovery, Freedom from Our Addictions. And for all my friends who don't like cussing and stuff, just be cautioned. He throws down the F-bomb quite a bit. I love it. I love him. So it's been very helpful to listen to and read and move through the ideas and strategies that he's got. And then there's a book right now that I'm working through called The Inner Work. It is an invitation to true freedom and lasting happiness. And it really is a book about, it is by, oh gosh, who's it by? It's by the yoga couple, Matt and Ash. I don't know what their last name is. It's not listed here. But it's a great book. It's about, right here. It is basically about recovery from trauma and moving from fear-based thinking, problem-focused thinking, to love-based thinking, solution-focused thinking. And allowing all the pain to move through us and to let it heal. The last book I'll leave for you on here is the Holy Bible. I mean, the scriptures in there, the beautiful examples in there are tools and resources we can use for everyday life and the recovery of addiction. The Bible says through that I can do all things through Christ Jesus who gives me strength. And so I can do all things through Christ Jesus who gives me strength. The Bible talks about who we are, that as a man thinks, so is he. That that ask, believe, and receive. It talks about God has not made us the tail. He's made us the head. He wants us to be above and not beneath. That we are called according to his holy purpose. And there's so many beautiful lessons and stories in the Bible to help us live our life to our fullest and to fulfill our holy purpose. We all have a purpose on this earth, whether we want to believe it or not. We all do. And I think a lot of addiction comes from not fulfilling that purpose in which we are meant to be a part of. That we're all supposed to be doing something. And when we're not doing that something, we do not operate well. So, my precious friends, I just pray right now that this encourages you, that it inspires you, that if you are finding yourself struggling, that you just lay on lots of loving, that this is not a space for judgment and shame, that it's a space for you to have awareness, that the awareness is 90% of the issue, that's 90% of the process. If you can just have awareness that you've got something going on and then move through the rest of it, the key is not to be judgmental. The moment we are judgmental over ourselves or someone else, we stick ourselves a little bit deeper in that situation. It's less freedom, less positive energy to help us get out of that issue. So have awareness. It's 90% of the work, just the awareness. Don't have judgment. And then love yourself the rest of the way through. Call on God to help you, help carry you for the rest of the 10%. Trust that people and situations and resources and tools are going to show up in your life to help guide you the rest of the way. And then trust yourself. It doesn't matter how deep in the depths you've been. I mean, I was drug addicted and in the slums. I mean, I might as well have been a prostitute. I was just giving it away for free. I mean, I can tell you story after story that are just full of shame. And yet here I am claiming my place and claiming that I am worthy. I am called to be here. I am worthy of love and belonging. I am worthy of healing. I am worthy of love and grace and ease. I am worthy of recovery. I am worthy of my precious children. I am worthy of my precious grandbabies. I'm worthy of my husband. I'm worthy of a great relationship. I'm worthy of connection with healthy, beautiful people. I'm worthy of friendships that grow me and shift me and guide me and hold me. I'm worthy of people's time. I'm worthy of money. I'm worthy of wealth. I'm worthy of progress. I'm worthy of my dreams and my visions and my greatest hopes to be coming true. That there's nothing I could do to keep myself from that love. And so I tell you that same thing, my precious friends. And I hope this blesses you. If you ever want to reach out to me for coaching or anything like that, you can reach me at my website, jenmajors.com. I am grateful to be back with you. I am just so grateful to be in this place. When I think about where I've come from, I am completely overwhelmed with joy and gratitude and humility and trust and faith that if I can make it through, so can you. Until next time, my precious and beautiful friends, I hope that you are blessed beyond measure.